So, good evening, everyone. I welcome you to the 72nd episode of Friday at 5, the most popular, engaging, and longest running weekly e-convo on school education. I request Dr. Atul Nishchal to initiate the conversation.
Thank you so much, Harinder. Now, one of the most ignored factor which impacts student engagement in their own learning is the quality of teacher-student relationship. There is very little research that has been done on it over the last 50 years or so. And we have assumed that this relationship should always exist. But we do not really care about identifying the conflicts in a teacher-student relationship. And we also do not know how to mend those conflicting situations. So Nilima, I'll start with you first, because I think let's try to look at it from our perspective.
If we don't understand the feeling of the child, we cannot reach the child. And if we cannot reach the child, but we wish to transact, will be transaction to the walls. So it's very important we understand what child wants, how the child wish, and then we deliver it.
The fact that now we are in a hybrid mode, okay, the fact that we are dealing with digital natives makes it a little bit more difficult or easy, I don't know what the perception is right now, to build these bonds, okay, to build a teacher-student bond, because we all have been trained to create this bond within the classroom, and with the hybrid model, the learning has expanded out from the classroom. Okay, let me bring in Manjula. Manjula, in addition to your thoughts on the topic, can I also ask you, what do you feel about, because there is a certain level of bias which exists, right? When a teacher is observing a child. I know that there are practices, for example, in the beginning of every academic year, the math teacher of class 9th would ask the math teacher of class 8th as to who are the best students in the class and who are the worst students in the class, and then form their own opinion based on the opinion of the previous teacher. Okay, so in those kind of practices, is it easy to make relationships with students, and are those practices good? How do we observe objectively?
Thanks, Atul. I think I love this question because this is something which during the days when I was a teacher, somewhere even I did this mistake. I was also wanting to know like how quickly I can complete the portions to understand this part. So I used to understand how means we used to really have a graph like how many students fall under, above average, below average, and who are in the mediocre, so that the portion completion something happens very quickly. And then this is what was my thought when I was a teacher. But now as we grew up as a leader, that's where we learned like what am I here as a teacher, where am I as a teacher, and what is actually an objective of being a teacher. Am I here for those students who are already good, or am I here existing for those who really are in need? So this is a culture I think most of the schools currently are working. Maximum schools are really not biased now. I think that traditional aspect of what we had those days is totally discarded. But one thing what I understood is like this online has really helped few more things which we didn't understand through physical classes. That is, we really got to know certain things, what's happening at the home, in their which most of the students try to avoid sharing with us. We really got to know, yes, this is the culture. The child is totally independent. He has locked his room. He is alone inside his room and he is doing his own work. There is somebody who is monitoring. There's a father and mother who's quite often coming and visiting the child, and they're seeing that the child is engaged in the class. And there are few who has built in a screen to avoid that kitchen is not visible, other rooms are not visible, or what father and mother is doing, or what kind of a discussion is happening, very nicely we could understand. And where nothing is there and the child is really shy and timid because he doesn't want his background to be visible, but it's inevitable, he cannot, that also we understood. And many aspects, when teachers shared their experiences while they took the classes, they told us. So we literally went one-on-one with the parents and made them understand the child is not interacting with us because he's very shy because of this atmosphere and the background what he's shown. He is shying away, putting off a screen, not opening up his mouth, always on mute.
So one of the better things is that we could observe them in their home learning, and therefore, that gave us better insights into what they were going through, right? Okay. Let me bring in Bala sir. Now, traditionally, fear psychosis has been used by teachers to dominate students. However, research says that that is not a very good idea. What are your views on that, sir?
The idea of fear psychosis is totally anti-educational. Learning doesn't happen when you have fear, right? And possibly we have been practicing a kind of authoritarianism in the class to show that I am the deliverer of knowledge. So the fact is, the focus has always been on teaching and not on learning. So any teacher who goes with this kind of feeling authority that I have to control the children is not delivering learning, is only conveying the information that he or she has. Because even neuropsychologically, when you deal with that, learning is an independent activity. Exclusively the onus and the responsibility of learning is with the learner, and the role of a teacher is to provide the emotionally competent stimuli wherein the learning takes place effectively. So this kind of a classical model of a teacher, having a priestly approach in the class, well, that worked at a given point of time. But with the kind of technology that we have, with the kind of social climate that we have, education has been democratized. And not only education, learning has been democratized. Learning could happen in spite of the teachers. And one point which I would like to say is, it has been well proved that learning is an emotional activity. It is not a mere cognitive activity. And therefore, any learning which is facilitated by the affective domain has an impact. So I think it's high time that that kind of a model is no more practiced in the class, and a teacher becomes a facilitator, a participant, a co-learner in the classroom.
We rarely see teachers of senior classes having fun with students or playing with students. How do you guys have fun with your students?
Since we are in hybrid mode, there are different ways which we are following. Like we have special days where we have Intakshari, online Intakshari.
Good.
Then we do is discussions. What is your favorite? What is my favorite? Knowing me, knowing you. And I feel when you share, you get closer.
Right. Good. Manjula, what is your take on that?
Actually, to start with, like, this is something, the question what you asked totally opposite. Now the generation is, the teachers are like students only nowadays. In fact, I myself, I don't talk about the subjects inside the class. We do talk more about the films. We do talk more about the cricket, because that's something which is floating now. When we initiate such topics, now students open up a lot. In fact, I do share my stories of my school days, and I say what I used to do for my teacher, how I used to tease my teacher, what nicknames I used to give my teachers, and what is my nickname in the class. How do you talk about me? Have I been compared to somebody else? Then they open up very nice. There was, in fact, we had a pizza party also.
You have been a pioneer of educational technology. The whole education world is now adopting some sort of technology, right? Now, how easy or difficult is it? And how do you think teachers can make best use of technology to create bonds?
Thank you so much for inviting me to the conversation. I'll definitely be back. One of the things that I think is really, really critical is the difference between digital natives and those of us who would be considered immigrants coming to the world of technology. I want to make sure that we're all aware that the term digital native and digital immigrant, that's a 10-year-old term. And that doesn't take into account the fact that those of us who are considered immigrants have actually now been totally immersed in technology. We're a very different breed of teacher or educator than we were 10 years ago. So just having ourselves now so immersed in technology has has brought a lot of teachers into this new era. And I think we've closed many, many gaps that would have existed 10 years ago. And so one of those things is I'll go back to the survey that you did at the beginning, Atul. The one that ranked lowest was allowing every student to take control. And I think that that's critical because you learn as a digital native, you have to own your own learning. You must take control of your own learning because much of it is asynchronous. And so much of it you're doing on your own, you're reading on your own. When you go into a brick and mortar classroom, you have the teacher directing and guiding and supporting the learning and driving the learning and moving us along going, we'll go to the next page, go to the next chapter, let's move. So the teacher, even in the greatest of student-centered classrooms, the teacher is still guiding and directing that daily process in the classroom. When you move into the online world, much of the learning is the student driving. And so the student must own, he must have control, he or she must have control of their own learning. And so it is critical that we get away from the mindset of control being us losing control as educators. It is empowering students to take ownership of their own learning. And so the pedagogy of teaching online is very different to teaching in a classroom environment. And so just let me share a couple of things that I think came up in the conversation, if I can direct something to that. Emergency online learning that we've all just experienced is not high quality online instruction or online learning, because we were thrown into things, most people, we could do our emails, we could do our spreadsheets, we knew how to find things on social media, but very few instructors globally have had the opportunity to really learn how to teach in an online environment, how to teach in a hybrid model. And so many, many problems, teachers should all be wearing superhero capes in my mind, because you had to create material, you had to learn how to, instead of writing your old lesson plans, now you had to create digital assets. You had to actually create learning. You have to grade in this new environment, and you have to still motivate the kids. And guess what? As much as we had a chance to look at the children in the classroom, they had a chance to look in their homes. They saw us. And suddenly educators who are used to working in the confines of their classroom are suddenly performers. You're a movie star. You're your own children are in the background. Maybe your husband or your spouse is working from home. Maybe your children are also working from home. And so all of the lines and the barriers and the boundaries got stopped. Everything just got shut down. And so what happened is, number one, we did make those connections with our students. We had very authentic connections because they saw us, in our home settings just as much as we saw them. Now they know how many children we have. Now they see our backgrounds. Now they know, what our homes look like. That very often they've seen our family walk by just as we've seen theirs. Mm-hmm. And so this bonding with students has gone in a new direction. You are no longer that sage on a stage. You're no longer that icon, that person on the pedestal that when they come into the school, they're very reverent about you and your role as a leader. That's all gone. They know you are just the same as their mother or their father or their doctor or whomever else that they've met. And that's a new environment for us in education. What we have to be careful of is remembering that we are still the educators, we are still responsible for more than entertainment. Because so many times we put assets into the online environment and think, oh, well, you know, they can read this, they can do this. At the end of the day, we're still about helping direct the learning process. We must still facilitate student learning. And so that's a whole different skill set. You're in a classroom, you go into the classroom as a teacher, and the teacher is able to manage small groups, direct this group of students, direct that group of students. The teacher can do lecture. The teacher has all kinds of skills that they've been using for years. And so the question is, now that these students are, some of them are taking the classes on the phone, some of them are, wherever the environment and whatever tools and resources that they're using, the students are accessing you in a different way. The one thing that they cannot get from online resources, online tools, from technologies, the thing they can't get is what I'll describe as teacher voice. And teacher voice is that inspiration, that clear, concise direction, that element of really supporting the collaboration between students. Because if you send kids physically into a room to go collaborate and say, okay, we're going to break up now and we're going to do a collaboration, those students will go into their little groups. 2 out of 4 won't work. The teacher walking the classroom will actually be able to go, John, Mary, Harinder, they'll be able to walk around and actually, engage and keep the students moving and keep them engaged and keep them working. When you go into online breakout rooms, or you've got them working independently on projects and so on, the students very often just get absorbed on their own, and you don't know, unless you're really on top of them, that they're not comprehending or that they're not moving. So
I'm going to come to one other aspect of teacher-student relationship. No matter how good I am as a teacher, there is a possibility of conflict coming into a teacher-student relationship. It's very, very important for each educator to learn how to handle those conflicting situations. Nilima, what would you, suggest that teachers can do to handle conflict in a teacher-student relationship?
I would say first, most important thing is rigidity. We need to remove that barrier. We need to understand, I think this pandemic taught us that we can learn many things from our students itself. The technology they know, we are grappling with. They are very, very conversant with it. So we need each other actually. And we complete each other also. So if the flow is very, very continuum, then it's effective, and it's always a two-way process. And it helps in your growth as well as students' growth. It's your outlook which you need to change.
Good. So let me get Manjula's view on this.
I would like to share one of the recent incident here, Atul.
Sure.
There was a grade 1 child in my cabin along with the parent. I was surprised to hear from a grade 1 child such a line. He clearly told me, I don't like to attend particularly only financial literacy class. The reason is my father had a huge argument with my teacher, and now my teacher don't like my father, so that's how she doesn't like me. And I think that's the reason she doesn't give me an option to talk inside the class, interact in the class. So I don't like that class.
Sure.
So that the child, I don't know from what made him to understand, because the child was totally not present during the interaction when teacher and a father had. But father did share all the report, what he had an interaction with the teacher and everything. And somewhere it was taken a huge place in this mind that he started feeling that my teacher don't like me because my father had a talk. This was one conversation. There was another conversation which my teacher came to my cabin and she shared very clearly saying, ma'am, that child always she joins English class, she takes math class, but I don't know why she doesn't join my bio class. I think, am I being very strict to the child? Is it wrong that I question the child, like, why are you not answering to me? Why are you not keeping your video on? And is it wrong that I immediately report to the parent what went right, what went wrong in the class? This was in the higher class. The incidents like this, when it comes to us, it gives us a lot of lessons, like what exactly we need to guide the child, and do we have to really bring in such talks inside the class and train the students how well you need to understand or perceive certain things. And at the same time, if it is an older student, how do we little more close that gap, or whatever the gap is getting opened with slight misunderstandings. That if you don't pay attention immediately, these are the things, like very smallest and the minutest things, which actually people ignore, and they always pay a larger attention or a bigger attention towards the exam portion completion, correction, I need to make so and so, blah blah, my result analysis.
Great. So I think her lesson is very clear. Immediate action needs to be taken if you notice a conflict. But my one last question for each one of you, and I'll start with Trina this time, is, Trina, I believe that, being a mathematician, I believe that if you want to improve something, the first step is for you to measure it. So if you can't measure it, I heard somewhere there's a quotation, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. Now, the question is, this whole notion about teacher-student relationship is measured on an intuitive level. So far, it's measured on a personal level. Can technology provide us a way to measure the strength of a teacher-student relationship and identify conflicts and rectify them? Is that a future possibility, or can it even happen today?
There are many tools out there today. We're in the early stages of this. With the AI and everything else that's out there, there are a lot of resources that are beginning to capture that. You're really looking at, so I'll give you an example of your teachers would run screaming if you did this today, but the technology's here. So I have a good friend, a colleague, and he has been involved in actually one of the world's leading researchers who has done a lot of work on oxytocin and, when you wear a Fitbit or an Apple Watch or some of these, when they capture your pulse and your vitals for running and jogging and all of the things we use these for, they can also measure engagement. So for example, if we are engaged in this study, if we all had our watches on today and we were hooked up to the app, they would know who's sleeping or who has turned it off or who just logged in. They know whether your pulse rate is going up because you're engaged in listening, or if you're walking around or drinking your tea or whatever else it is. So that translates as well to the classroom. The tools are already here, less than $10 US for wearing and accessing the app and so on. We know if a teacher is engaged in the lessons and the teacher is engaged in in working. Same thing, we can record with technology if the students are actually engaged. Now, that's an extreme because not everybody's going to wear things like this, but the bottom line is the tools are available for us to be able to do that from a technology perspective. So backing that up then and saying, what else is out there? You're actually able to, count the hours, the time on task, see who is engaged in the online tools and who has turned them off. Or, someone hasn't moved the mouse. Many corporations are using that now to see if they haven't been scanning, flicking, rolling, scrolling. So technology is there. It's just, how do we use it where it's not intrusive, where it's not upsetting to people? Because you really can monitor today who's working, who's not, who's engaged, who's not.
But let's assume we don't have this technology. And I'm now coming to Balas.
Right.
Balas, we don't have this technology. Okay.
Right.
But it is still important for us and schools to figure out a way to monitor and measure teacher-student relationship. I know we have never done that so far. That has never been monitored or measured in any school, no matter what we say. If we had to do it, is there a way to do it?
Well, Atul, I don't think that in terms of research, we have really done any work in respect of measurement of the relationship between the learner and the teacher. All that what has been done have been only intangible definitions and what do you call observations, which are highly personalized, right? And therefore, the observations have been highly subjective rather than objective. There have been certain attempts in order to, paraphrase and put general quotients which will define what is a good relationship between the teacher and the learner. But let me tell you only one thing, right? That so long learning is emotional, so long there is an emotional interaction between the teacher and the learner, conflicts are bound to come. Now, so long as that learning is driven by your hormones, there could be variations in the relationship between the teacher and the learner. So in order to find a standardized formula that a particular teacher should have only this kind of a level of emotion is not correct. What needs to be done is that in order to have a good relationship, a teacher needs to understand that there are two important dimensions. One, the personal self, the other is the professional self. And I think what happens is we try to let the personal self dominate over the professional self, and therefore the conflicts come. So when you get into the profession, you have got to be so what needs is professional etiquettes of a teacher have got to be developed, maintained, monitored, and I think that's what would be the best solution at this point of time.
I would request each of my panelists to share their closing statements, any other remark that they feel we missed out and they feel is important.
I would like to say when students come excited, like very happy, the big smile next morning, it indicates that they're very happy and they love the interaction. Second thing is when they send you emojis, which says that the happy face, yes, they have understood what you are doing in the classroom. And when you check your learning outcomes, that measures your success also. And second thing is, we have to understand no screwdriver can fix all the problems. So we have to be very, very open-minded. And as we will be getting more and more challenges in front of us, and we have to face it with one vibe and with one strength, yes, we can do it.
Trina, over to you.
I think one of the things that that strikes me from having listened today and participated with you is culturally, many of our children have not been brought up, most of us, we're brought up with devices and they know the technologies and so on. But culturally, we have not, none of us, no country, we have not adapted culturally to asking for kids' opinions, asking children to participate, asking them for direct feedback. And it's a new era for us. I think even though we may go back to a physical building, we are never going back to the same environment. We're never going back to children just sitting in nice, neat rows behind a desk and not participating. The lid is off the box, and now we need to begin to adjust. And I think that's going to be a really healthy next conversation, is how do we redesign our culture in the brick and mortar classroom to take advantage of what technology brings and to take advantage of all we've learned during the pandemics, so that the new brick and mortar school going forward provides a lot more advantages for students and creates a better culture for children and for educators working in those brick and mortar buildings.
Balaji, your statement.
Well, Atul, 10 years from now, if we are going to have an ICSL Friday at 5 Econ was, probably we'll be discussing the same question in a different context. Because technology is a culture catalyst, and I've lived with technology for 40 years now, from 81 onwards, and I've seen what kind of changes things have happened. And I believe with the kind of new technologies emerging, you will find that the questions will continue to remain there. and teachers possibly need to evolve every time. And this is not a kind of a comma, or a full stop, but it's a continuous learning process. And I think the challenge is that the teacher becomes as much a learner with the culture, with the technology, as the children are. So I look forward to this opportunity for another 10 years later.
In the end, I want to thank all of my panelists for being on the show.